Hi, this is Victoria Schneps, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm the publisher of the Queens Courier, the Brooklyn Home Reporter, the Brooklyn Spectator, and the Spectator News. But tonight, we are Victoria's stars. And the star that's been shining so brightly for decades in our community is Senator Martin Golden. Welcome.
Thank you, Victoria.
You are a star in our community, for sure,
Well,
for sure. And,
Mom, I've been happy to hear that.
Well, listen, I heard you're one of 8. How did you survive in a family? Where was your placement? Where were you in that 8?
I was the oldest. I'm the oldest of 8.
Oh,
and
you are.
And we had 8 and 10 years. So Mom
God
and Dad
bless.
were quite busy.
Wow.
So you learned how to play well in the sandbox with others. And you were the first one at the dinner table. You were the best fed. And the first one up in the morning was the best dressed. So you knew how to
Wow.
do those things early on in life.
I'm fascinated, how, I had 4 children, so I get it a little, but I had a lot of help. But I don't know how people do that in terms of how, as the oldest, and you were just 1 year apart, basically?
My brother was 11 months. They would call them Irish twins. So
Oh.
the rest of them were about a year apart, year and a
Wow.
couple months.
So did you kind of become, not I wouldn't say a substitute, but the relationship of taking care of each one down the line, how did that work in the family?
It worked very well. We grew up with a lot of kids on the block. We were superintendents of an apartment building at 6623 Ridge Boulevard.
So you grew up in Bay Ridge?
Yeah, grew up.
Born and bred.
Over on 87th Street in Fort Darien is where I was born. Went to St. Patrick's for 1 year and then moved to 6623 Ridge Boulevard. And we'd be supers of the building. My father would work a full-time job and be the superintendent. My mom would work a full-time job. And we would, as we got older, take care of the building for Mom and Dad. And we worked well together, my brothers and sisters, and we still do. We go over and see Mom on a regular basis. We have her, she's at 266 79th Street, where we finally moved in the 1970s, 1978, 1979. I guess the family moved into that location.
A lot of bedrooms, or you shared, how many, I'm trying to picture what the bedrooms alone were like.
4 boys in one room, 4 girls in the other room.
Oh, you had 4 and 4, how lucky is
Yeah,
that?
Yep. And Mom and Dad in the other.
Oh, how neat.
And then when we got it, obviously we went into a house at 266 79th Street, so most of them got, 2 in a room, 1 in a room, somewhere along those lines. It got
Well,
much
what did
better.
you get? Didn't you get to pick? You're the oldest.
I got to pick. I did very well.
Yeah, because that's, part of what happens. So I know you went into the force. Did you come right out of school into the force, or how did your life evolve? Was it a calling? Because to be an officer, to me, is a calling. It's so hard.
It was, I was a stock boy in the A&P, and believe it or not, I worked right up until I was 23 years of age doing that as a part-time job. And I was in Young and River Camp for a short period of time. And then I got called for the police department, and I went over. And
now, a family in it? Because going into police is not easy.
No.
And sometimes it's traditional.
I was the first one. And
you were?
Believe me, there was many that followed. My brother's was a court officer. My other brother was a court officer, became a police officer. His wife was a police officer. He was a lieutenant in charge of counterterrorism, my brother Patrick. And his wife was in applicant investigation. I got a nephew in the 7-0 as a sergeant. I got another nephew that's in intelligence. I got another niece that's in Truck 6 in Bay Ridge. She's in emergency service truck. And we have a host of other relatives that are throughout courts and police and fire.
So what do you think brought you to that? You had choices. Did you go to college right out of, right into that?
Went to college, didn't have a degree. Didn't get a degree till later on. But it was something that I liked, and they put me into neighborhoods that I believed in actually accomplishing, having a goal and a purpose and being able to complete something. And I've seen my work working with the police department in precincts like the 6771, East Flatbush, East New York. And
those are tough neighborhoods, East New York.
They were tough then.
They're still tough today. East New York is still...
Well, like I said, it's a big difference today.
Hasn't gentrified yet.
But you still, today it's just as dangerous as being a cop as it was then. But there were a lot more shootings back then, a lot more homicides. Today it's a whole different ballgame. We've had an interesting array of management here in the city over the past number of years between Rudy Giuliani, Michael Bloomberg, and presently Mayor de Blasio. So it should be very interesting as we move along here in the city of New York. And hopefully we maintain, and I'm pretty sure we will under Commissioner Bratton, a safe city, and I think that's what people really want, is to know that they got safe communities. And I believe that that will continue, and we will do that.
Well, I know that, I'm such an anti-gun person, and the mayor has come out where he wants to put, the former mayor, pardon me, put all his money, let's not say all his money.
Oh, it's not even a fraction.
Let's keep it straight, guys, here, that it's a priority to really push home the need to control this gun situation. I mean, every day we're hearing things. I mean, thank God the crime is nowhere where it was when you were a police officer.
Sure.
I'm sure it was a huge difference to what
Sure.
it is today. So what do you make of this gun control push? I mean, we in New York, I think, are probably in the forefront. But how do you see this playing out around the country? I mean, his money is to buy the influence, I think, that the gun lobby has. So if it's not, what are you seeing happening, and how can we here in New York help in that? Because I assume you are against gun violence and guns.
Well, you got to be very careful. The guns are something that have been part of our fabric for many, many years. So you got to be very, very careful.
Did you see Judge Stevens, the former Supreme Court judge, just came out with a book saying that the Constitution should be changed with the right to bear arms being deleted?
Well, if you can change the Constitution at will like that, we can change the Constitution throughout. So I don't believe we should be changing the Constitution. I do believe, however, that the laws that we passed here under Governor Cuomo have brought down, I believe, and will continue to bring down shootings across the city and state of New York.
Can you be specific? What is the, what bill particularly has made a difference?
Well, the bill that made a difference was the one I did some years ago, and that was making it a B felony if, in fact, a violent felony, if, in fact, you had possession of a gun here in the city of New York, which meant that you used to get a slap on the hand, you get 30 days in jail, maybe 6 months in jail. This guaranteed there's 3 years in jail. So you would not get walking away without spending 3 years in jail, and they would cop down to probably 2 years. 2 years was the bottom line you would get for possession of a loaded weapon in the city and state of New York. So that immediately brought down, some years ago, about 4 years ago, brought down the
Well,
shootings.
does stop and frisk come into that? Because if you're able to stop and frisk somebody, you find out if they have a gun on them, and then you're able to put that.
Well, stop and frisk, I believe, is a bit of contention on the number of stop and frisks that were done over the past number of years. But as a police officer in 1970s and 1980s, I did stop and frisk, and I filled out a form. It was called a 250, UF 250, and it allowed me to be able to build the probable cause or give me the right to make that arrest, like you've just pointed out. How do you find out they have a gun? But you have to have a reason to stop somebody, and I believe that even in the reduction in the stop and frisk, we still see guns being taken off the street. Illegal guns is probably 1 million guns on the streets of the city of New York.
I mean, you're saying 1 million as a real million, not just
that's not
euphemism.
Those are real numbers. And if you take a look at the number of permits in the city of New York, about 38,000 out of 8.5 million people.
Wow.
So when you think about that, that's pretty staggering.
So
that's
why
not
do you
including the
think-
police officers and the court officers and the others that have the right to carry. Yes.
So why do you think, and what can we do about, do you think it helps to have the guns registered, to increase the registration of guns?
I think the registration for guns is, if done appropriately, like it is in the city of New York, works. And I believe those that carry and have a reason for a permit, a carry permit, should be allowed to carry. And in most cases, and the majority of the cases, 99%, you never see a problem. 1%, you may see a problem. A gun gets stolen in a burglary or something along those lines, but that happens to cops as well as to civilians. So that's the only downside. But when you have a gun there, you have somebody that's able to run into a location that's being robbed, into a crowded area where you have a person with a gun or a knife that can take control of a situation, that has the ability and the training to do that, would be a retired member of the service or a person, Joe Civilian, who has the right to carry, that has a business, is able to intervene.
Well, you said the magic word, the right. And so what I'm concerned about is, okay, we live here in New York City, and you've passed some good laws, personally leading the charge, but these people are getting guns from the states around us or anywhere, mail order.
True. Well,
so is that how we have to attack this? I mean, how do we get control outside of our city?
Well, they're not coming. They're not coming into a mail order, but they are coming up the I-95 from Virginia and from other states that have lenient gun sales, that they can go in off the street with a license and buy a gun right there, and you can leave that state with that possession of that gun. You need periods of waiting periods, 24 hours, 72-hour wait periods, so you can find out if, in fact, the person that you're getting that license from is, in fact, who he says he is,
right,
and doesn't have a criminal record and has the right to carry a gun.
How about a mental problem?
And a mental problem. That's the biggest problem. It's not we can pass all the laws in the world, but if we have a person that has a mental condition and that person gets a hold of a gun, it's unfortunately, you've seen them up and down the country.
Give me an example.
Is a gang law. What you do is you take the gang law and you increase the penalties for possession of a gun. You jump to a B felony.
Legislation?
I have it.
You got it. All right.
I passed it 2 years in a row.
Oh.
And we're going to go again this year. And we're going to go
let's
after.
watch
We need the
that
assembly to get it done.
in our newspapers.
And
we will.
We go after those that would initiate people into gangs, kids into gangs. We go after them as well, and we take them. It's copied right out of the.
Sounds like a no-brainer. Why has this been having any trouble getting through the Senate and the Assembly?
It gets through the Senate every year. The Assembly has its difficulty, and hopefully this year the governor will take some leadership here, along with this mayor and the police commissioner, and we will be able to get that passed.
Well, we're going to go after that in our newspapers. And, you said the magic word that, this whole business of the Assembly, the Senate. Now, I'm involved in following government, but I'm still like, what is going on up there in Albany with all these different factions? Explain it to me so I can understand this.
It works, believe it or not.
Contingent that came out, and the group that's in, and the group that's. I don't know.
I think there's a poll out today that Siena poll that says the 16% of people would want to see the Republicans control the Senate, 22% would want to see the Democrats in charge of the Senate, and then there's a poll that says 58% want to see the configuration that presently exists with the Democrats and the Republicans working together with the independent Democrats in leadership running the state Senate.
Well, would you please explain that to me? I'm sorry, I don't understand what that means.
Well, there are 5 Democrats that created their own independent Democratic conference. 5. And out of those 5, they work with us, the 30 Republicans. And that gives us the majority that we need to be able to balance the legislation and the budget process going forward in the state Senate. And then there's 26 Democrats. And
so these are Democrats that became themselves independent, broke away from the Democrats.
They're still Democrats. They're still Democrats. Independent of the Democratic caucus. They're their own caucus, and they side with the Republican conference. So we have the independent Democrats and the Republican conference as a united force in many of the pieces of the legislation, working with Dean Skelos, our leader, and Klein is the leader of the independent Democrats. And we work very well together in crafting the governor's proposals, moving them forward, and we did some great stuff here. We got that pre-K money for the mayor of the city of New York, $300 million. We had another $200 million.
Why was there a discussion about this between the mayor and the governor? Would you also explain that to us?
Well, it was the way I think unfortunately, communications sometimes breaks down, and the amount of money that was originally asked for was $540 million. There's only so much money out of the $137 billion budget that you can put towards education. It wound up at the end of the day that we put the most money we've ever put towards education. So
was that $350 million?
We got $300 million for the pre-K. $200 million went to a foundation fund, foundation dollars, which is money for after-school programs. They got another $400 million for operating. So he did considerably well, and we put $163 million towards early intervention. And there's going to be a $2 billion bond that's going to go out in November, and that $2 billion bond, we will get, the city of New York, we'll get somewhere around 40% of that, or $800 million. So if you look at
capital things,
capital for actually it's going to be used for technology, for computers.
Now, I know you're on that committee, or you lead that committee.
I am, and I'm going to tell you, it's very important.
You're a techie? I want to hear the truth. Are you a techie?
I'm a techie because the governor put forward a tax-free New York, and tax-free New York was really to help the counties outside the city of New York. But if you take a look at Brooklyn, Brooklyn is the fastest growing location in the country. If you take a look at Bush Terminal, you have 30 buildings down there.
It's exciting
Those
every
30
day.
buildings got 2,500 people. Those buildings, I believe, over the next 5 to 10 years will have 25,000 people working in them. You have the federal building that's there as well. That's got another 1 million square feet, of which we're going to see some manufacturing there in women's clothing. And so you're going to see biotech and biomedical going into these individual locations. We have biotech that's from SUNY Downstate over at the Brooklyn Army Terminal. And we're setting up a triangle with NYU Poly, Pratt, and New York Tech, working in that area to set up another set of biotechs and biomeds.
Exploding.
And then you have Steiner Studio, and we have over there Carnegie Mellon, which we'll be working with, and Medgar Evers College.
Broadway stages, because they're very big. They're like under the radar.
No, Broadway stages are excellent. They are doing very, very good. They purchased the property out in Staten Island. They're building on that prison.
I'm announcing it officially. Arthur Kills Prison is now going to be the largest movie stage studio in New York, probably maybe in the country. 87 acres.
It's going to be tremendous.
And she's one of my top women in business, Gina, who family owns this wonderful Broadway stages. But, they've been very low under the radar, right?
Yes, well, I got to tell you,
they're fabulous. I'm so excited about that project.
He puts up a studio within 6 to 8 weeks. He finds an empty place. He can have that ready and done and working as a studio within 8 weeks.
Well,
he is very talented.
Not only does he do that, but I was just over there at their offices. They make it a point to support every local business, the coffee shop, the cigar maker, the TV show, the TV shop. Every small business that surrounds any one of their Broadway stages locations, they made a book to give to all of their people that work in their stages to use the local businesses. Trickle-down effect is unbelievable.
Tony Argenti and his sister are doing wonderful things. And so
what
the
a
Steiner
model.
Studios, and I got to tell you, the studios in Queens, and it's all because we put together some years ago, Senator Golden, the tax credit, and it worked so well.
That better be in gold.
Well, it is. It's $420 million. So people say, why do you give that type of credit to that type of industry? It was a $4 billion industry. Today is an $8 billion industry. We've put hundreds of thousands of people to work across the state. It is a tax credit that really works.
Yes.
And we didn't do that because of California or any. We did it because we were losing our work to Canada.
Yes.
And we created so much of an interest in this tax credit. 40 states now have a tax credit. Wow. 40 states. California was a $30 billion industry. It's dropped considerably. I'm not against California. I want everybody to do well. But I know my focus is New York City, New York State, and that credit is working really good. And the Broadway stages and Steiner and others are perfect examples of how many movies and how many series and how much TV and production work for movies is going on here, and commercial work is going on here in our city.
And the ripple-down effect is enormous. I mean, we see that too. Wyckoff Hospital sits on the border between Ridgewood and Bushwick. And they have a wonderful new director there, CEO Raymond Rodriguez. And he shared with me, they have so many businesses now that have survived and flourished. He said when he came, there was one coffee shop on the street. Now there are 5. So I think sometimes we don't realize the power of a bigger player to all the smaller players.
True.
I mean, I'd love to see that happening.
Well, another guy I'll give credit to, what you got to do is you got to build, and you got to continue to build. And the other guys I'll give credit to is Marty Markowitz and the way he did for Brooklyn. But this stadium that we have here, right here in Brooklyn, there's a perfect example of a middle of no place, right, that people wanted some years ago. They couldn't get it to Brooklyn Dodgers, and they left, and they went out this great state. And lo and behold, the Nets get it, and it is the largest venue, the most used venue, the highest percentage in the country, that stadium right there today, Barclays Stadium. Great insight, the people, Forrest Ratner and the group that came together to put that together. It is excellent, and it's working well. And the housing, look at right where the theater is right now.
That's right. Well, one of the things that I've learned over the years being in the news business is sometimes political people bend to noisemakers in the neighborhood. I don't want this in my backyard. NIMBY. And I thought it took a lot of courage on Marty's part. He had a lot of arrows thrown at him
Well,
to withstand the pressure.
he's not the only one. We stood down here because they didn't want this to happen, and they went against the unions. And I stood here with the carpenters and other unions to put the people to work here in this great city. It turned out to be a great project, and now we see the housing is starting to go up. This will give opportunity for families to stay and live in the fastest growing county, I believe, in the nation. It is moving in leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
And we got to keep the jobs coming so that the real jobs. That's why we talk about biotech and biomeds. And, you know, we talked about the film tax credit. Well, all those little games that we play, I set up a room at NYU Poly. Do you know the people that discover these games? They get on a plane after they finish their education. They go to Arizona, California, back to China, India, Japan, out of here. So what we have an incentive to try to incentivize that industry to stay right here. Take that product that they discover and take it to production, manufacturing here in the state of New York.
What are the
and we will
incentives?
give
Are you
you an
going to give them
incentive.
incentives? Okay. I think you talk incentives, you talk business.
That's exactly what you have to do.
Right.
They're $100,000 jobs. You can raise
Wow.
a family, you can buy a home, you can invest in Brooklyn, and you can stay here. And I think that's what's important.
Yeah, I think it's, evolving constantly, and it must keep growing. One of the things we talked about in my past interviews is how do you keep a business successful? By growing it and keeping up with what's changing and what's happening. What do you see in your own, your career has been such a big involvement in this community. Do you have some pet projects that you want to talk about?
Well, I talked about some of them. My
Yes.
big thing is being able to build, and if you can build on things, and give people opportunities, and you can see a purpose and a goal. And when you see at the end of that purpose and that goal, you see something really happening, such as the biotech over at Brooklyn Army Terminal, such as working with the different businesses along 3rd Avenue and down below 3rd Avenue in the Bush Terminal, and working with the Federal Building, and working with the NYU Poly, working with our hospitals to make sure that we get good hospital care, and that Long Island College issue, and working with the...
What is the latest on that? I
that's-
mean,
that's-
that is like an evolving soap opera.
That's going to continue to move on. That's
it?
going
In
to be
what
a
way?
page. I believe that eventually somebody does get it. I believe that it comes to conclusion shortly, and I believe that it'll probably be an emergency care and urgent care at that location, and there'll be housing there as well. And I think we'll get a combination of what everybody wanted. Nobody's going to be happy, but everybody will be satisfied. And I think that's what's going to happen here, and I think that you'll see very, very shortly. But my focus has been to try to bring those deals together, bring people together, and work with the state to make that happen. And I believe at the end of the day, the people in Brooklyn will be happy because health care is very, very important. The Obama health care has changed the dynamics. The state Medicaid redesign that we've done here under Governor Cuomo has changed the design. We have to be able to work with the people here, that we have a high Medicaid, a high Medicare number here living in the County of Kings, and we have to make sure that they get good medical care, and we have to make sure that the facilities are there to take care of them, the nursing facilities, the assisted living
You also have
facilities.
been helpful, and I founded an agency for retarded children, children with developmental disabilities, and children with autism. And that is kind of like exploding, kids with autism. And I think that the sensitivity of being able to have services where parents don't have to constantly be begging for what's their right to have.
We fought the governor on this last year. We got that money. He didn't take that $90
That's
million,
right.
which would have been another it would have been $180 million. Would have
Taking
come out of that industry.
Taking the flesh from the bones, and it was at a bones
Here's
point.
the bed. The number keeps moving. It used to be 140, one in 140, then it was 100 and one in 120, then one in 88, and the latest statistics, it's 1 in 66
It's
that are
scary.
coming out with autism, and it's 1 in 29 boys. So when you think about this, we as a country have to wake up, and we have to be able to correct this imbalance and do more money into research. And we have to have the services there for the parents in our community. So your company, LifeWorks, which I've met with them and talked with them, and HeartShare and Guild for Exceptional Children and Program Development Services. There were so many of them out there doing so much good work. We're going to continue to give them the resources they need to be able to take care of our families so our families can stay. And I'm going to continue to do that. That is something that is dear to my heart. And there's more and more people of need today than there were years ago. 1 in 66
No,
with
it's a
autism.
very
It is,
shocking statistic.
in only certain parts of the country. So we
Really?
should
That I wasn't
understand.
aware of.
We should understand
Right.
where these spikes are, why the spikes are in these different areas, and how we can work to control that.
Well, one of the things that we see is that services are best when they're in a smaller setting. And what I fear terribly is the days of the Willowbrooks, when you had these large institutions, should never come back, because there's a big push for consolidation. And consolidation means bigger, and bigger with people with special needs is more impersonal. That's been proven already. We shouldn't have to go back to those days. And that's kind of like some of the thinking that's going on right now. It scares me.
Well, we have a good friend, both of us, and it's a shame he's not in the Senate any longer, but Frank Padovan.
Yes.
It was the Padovan law that went out there and that made a difference in allowing for these residency programs to have that personal care, that small care. And we're going to continue to make sure that that happens. We're not going to go
I
back.
need your eyes on that, Marty. You're up there.
Hey, listen.
You
we
have to one of our
so much to do.
advocates.
Well, you happen to, your newspaper, you have, it's one of the finest communities in this great city. Bay Ridge and Dyker and Bensonhurst are continuing to flourish and to
Yes.
grow. Marine Park, they are just great, great neighborhoods. And there's so much to do. We're surrounded by 25% parks. We have great educational system. We have
Great small businesses that need to be protected, too.
This is correct. We got to get rid of regulation. Regulations are what hurts. And
Yes.
if you see what we did here with this budget, we cut back on the corporate tax on the manufacturers, and we cut back on the real estate tax on the manufacturers, and we did a whole lot for our seniors, and being able to change opportunities and making senior citizen rent exemptions up to, $50,000 was $29,000 with your income, and the same thing with the EPIC, the insurance program, up to $100,000 for a couple, which is considerable.
Well, small businesses still need the focus of people like yourself, who can find ways to be able to make it easier to be in business. I know that they've let up a little bit on this ABC rating and given people a chance to be able to correct whatever their problems are rather than being fined to death. It's like a new tax on the fines.
They are.
And I think that that's unfair.
I never finished, when I got into politics, there was a little area that I was a police officer till 1983, and then I went into owning the Bay Ridge Manor on 76th Street with my
Right, so
brother.
you're a small business owner yourself.
That's correct.
I forgot
and,
that.
And my brother
Right.
took that over, and he runs a great, great catering business
Yes,
there.
it is.
And we have a little building next to it. And but I became the president of the Fifth Avenue Board of Trade, and that's how I got involved into these different groups.
I need you to stay involved and stay tuned, because Victoria Stars is coming to an end, but we are delighted to have had our state senator, our beloved Martin Golden, as our guest tonight. And he's going to keep at it, because he's like me. He's going to keep going till he drops.
I certainly am. And
Have a
thank you,
good
Victoria.
evening. Thank you for being with me.
Thank you very much.